Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to handle the fetchFruits-failed action. We're going to learn how to deal with an error. So, looking here at our saga, just before going there, remember that the find all, we modified it so it will always reject with a new error after 2 seconds to simulate a problem from this fake API endpoint. So going back to the sagas.js file, let's take a look at the fetchFruits handler saga here. So we make a call to find all. So the middleware is gonna suspend this function, the execution, and we'll wait until this guy resolves, this promise resolves. And once it does, it will assign the value to the variable fruits. Now, this guy, if this promise is not resolved but rejected, that is, there was a problem, Redux Saga will cause this to emit or throw an error here in this generator function. Now, to catch that error, you need to use the try and catch block. To do that, you enclose everything you want to do in a try block. Then you add a catch right after the try, like so. Oops, don't need the arrow here. So it's going to try to do these statements. If there is any problem, that is, if in this case this promise rejects, it's automatically going to throw an error right here. Then, because an error was thrown, it's going to go immediately to the catch block. Everything else will be skipped. Then it's going to go execute the commands in the catch block. Now, if something happens in the call to find all, in our case we changed it so it rejects with an error, that means the request failed. In that case, we have to emit an action called fetchFruits-failed, and we have to let the user know there was a problem and what the error message was. To do that, we're going to simply do the following. We're going to dispatch an action with put, and this is going to be of type fetchFruits-failed, right? Now we need to let the user know a specific problem. The error is an error object. This error variable is an error object. To get that message that we made failed to fetch fruit data, we need to say error.message. So let's go back to Saga. As the payload, I'm just going to pass the error.message, okay? So that's going to give us that message. Now, what we're going to do when we dispatch this. Now, you have to always keep adding yield, don't forget, because we're dealing with generator functions. So Redux Saga is going to, remember generator functions, when we call that generator function, we got a generator, right, object. And then from the generator object, you keep calling that .next method. And that will keep executing every next yield statement. So that's why we always need to add the yield. Otherwise, it will not know when to stop and take the next command. So make sure you remember to add the yield there. So Redux Saga is going to look at this declarative effect called put that merely we give it. This guy returns an object with an instruction to dispatch an action. Now, Redux Saga is responsible for taking this instruction and executing the actual command, the actual statement of dispatching an action, right? So we use that and then we get an error message, and that's pretty much it. So now we have to handle this guy. We're not done yet, because all Redux Saga does is, in this case, it's just emitting or dispatching the action. Now we have to handle the state with the reducer. We still have to do that. So let's go back, save this file, go back to src/reducer.js. Now here, add another case. Now this other case is going to be to handle the fetchFruits-failed action type. Now we're going to return the same way. Make a copy of the original state into an empty object. You can use the triple dots if you have the Babel preset already set up. I don't have it, so can't use it. Anyway, So I'm going to copy the properties from the state. Then I'm going to add a new property with the third object here. We're going to say that the fruits, you have to say, give a variable to store the error here. So you can define a property to store the error. Let's call it error. And I'm going to take that error from the action.payload. Remember we did a dispatch from the Redux Saga implementation, that Saga, to dispatch the error message as the action.payload. And we're going to assign that to the property called fruits error. Okay, just as a note, if it happens to fail, that also means that fruits is no longer loading. So you have to actually also do fruits loading false. Fruits loading false here. So with that, let's actually define some initial value for fruits error in the initial state. How about that? If you go up here, just so we can add fruits error. Let's make it no, because initially there will not be any error, right? So if there's an error, it's going to set from no to the string of the error. Now this is nice, but we have also take care to reset that error if we happen to make a new request, right? Because we don't want to keep displaying that error message every time to the user, even though you try to make a new request. So when you make the request, fetch fruits requested, make sure to also clear out the error message, because there will not be any errors yet when you make the request, only when you obtain the response. So you have to say fruits error null here to reset the error every time. Okay? How about that? So that's great. Now we have to make this guy available to our application, our component called app. So let's go to app. Now in order to use that value, we have to go to map state to props, right? To be able to say here in map state to props, add the new property called fruits error. And this property is going to show up as this.props.fruits error for the app component. Now, how can we get this value? That's from the state, the application state, the Redux store, dot fruits error, okay? It just so happens that the same name here and there, but this is the actual prop name that's going to appear. It could be anything. It would refer to the state.fruits error. Anyway, so we got that. That's great. Now let's go back here, and we need to show some message, right, in case there was an error. Now I'm going to add a new if statement at the top, and I'm going to say if this.props.fruits error. So fruits error is a string, but if the string contains, actually fruits error is initially null. So we only want to display the error message if this value is not null. That means it has to be a string with an error message that's not length 0, right? Because an empty string is actually a falsy value. Anyway, so let's make sure there's all the error there. If there is an error, if this string is defined, we have to return some sort of error message in the UI. To keep things simple, I'm just going to display a simple message saying there was a problem. There was a problem. And then I'm going to put let me just make this into multiple lines. I'm going to use the actual error message to be more specific about the problem. I put a BR here to break the line. And I'm going to say this.props.fruits error there. Remember, you need the braces to substitute the value here. So there, it's going to say there was a problem with the problem description, the error. Okay, so let's test it out. Let's go to Firefox. You can see if you refresh, it takes 2 seconds, and then it says the message, there was a problem, failed to fetch fruit data. And if you look at the trace from the console logs, you can see it does dispatch the fetch fruits requested. Then after some time, after 2 seconds, it gets another action was dispatched, and that's fetch fruits fail. That's the Redux Saga doing its work. Remember, it caught that error that was thrown from the promise returned from find all. Find all returns a promise, but that promise was rejected with an error. Because of that, Redux Saga throws an error in that generator block, that function generator block. Because we use a try catch block, it's gonna go right to the catch block from that part. If you look back here, so we were here, call, this guy throws an error. So because there was an error, it goes to the catch block, skips everything else in the try, and then it emits an actual call fetch_fruits_failed with the error message as the payload. And you can see right here that that was indeed the case. An action was dispatched, and then finally it changes, like you can see the this.props of the app, that now fruits error is a string with the error description. Okay, so that's error handling with Redux Saga. So that's it for this lesson, and thank you for watching, and until the next one.